ES Audio.
From the Evening Standard in London, I'm Rachael Travers, and this is The Leader. More travel chaos on the rails. Today marks the first of 3 days of industrial action affecting trains this week. The latest round of strikes come at a time when it's half term, and with huge concerts, festivals, the Epsom Derby and the FA Cup final all due to take place this weekend. Unions are now being accused of purposely targeting big events, after previously scheduling strikes whilst the UK hosted the Eurovision Song Contest just a few weeks ago. This was ASLEF General Secretary Mick Whelan's response when asked what his message was to football fans who face huge disruption travelling to Wembley this weekend.
Truly don't want to do that, but I'll take it back 12 months and they shut the railway to London on the same weekend. Yet we get clattered for it and the rest of the people don't. Look, we want people to travel, all people use railways, all people out of their cars, all a green future. We don't want to be doing this, but unfortunately we're left no choice.
Rachael Burford is the Evening Standard's chief political correspondent.
So today, ASLEF union members, ASLEF is the union that represents train drivers, are striking across the country. They're striking again on Saturday, and RMT members are walking out on Friday as well. So we've got 3 quite large strikes this week during half term.
And which train operators are affected?
So these are members who work for the Rail Delivery Group, which covers about, I think it's 15 rail operators. So, I mean, that's, the really large operators like Avanti West Coast, Cross Country, London North Western, Thameslink. And then today also, services like the Heathrow, Gatwick and Stansted Express trains are also cancelled. So it's basically everyone apart from Network Rail.
How much disruption will these strikes cause?
So, I mean, it's half term at the moment. So obviously a lot of people are using services like the Heathrow, Gatwick and Stansted Express trains, to get to airports because they're going on holiday. There are slightly fewer people at work than normal because of the break. But that means that there's a lot of events going on, particularly in London. So on Saturday, there are really big events. You've got the FA Cup final between Manchester United and Manchester City taking place at Wembley. And there are no trains at all between Manchester and London that same day as well. You've got the Epsom Derby, and there's no trains to Epsom or Epsom Downs where the racecourse is. There's a cricket test match, England v Ireland at Lords. And also you've got Beyonce doing her big Renaissance World Tour concert at Tottenham Stadium too. So there are these massive events going on, particularly on Saturday. And you'll have had the RMT union on strike on Friday, which is going to have a knock-on effect on Saturday anyway. And then just a huge number of trains all across the country completely cancelled on that Saturday.
People have accused rail unions of purposely targeting big UK events. Is there any truth in that?
Yeah, so I mean, the government have said, the last few strikes have been on days when there's massive events going on. And unions have said, well, every time there's strikes, there may be things going on. We don't particularly plan them that way. But I think the whole point is to cause disruption, to show that they are, a vital service and how needed they are across the country. So I think there probably is a little bit of truth in the facts that they are trying to put them on days where they'll have the most impact.
What is the travel advice for this week?
The advice is, if you can avoid it, don't travel, particularly on those strike days. Services are extremely busy. We saw at Paddington this morning, people that could get in, commuters were packed on trains, and there was very, very few trains. At the weekend, there's going to be very few trains between London and the North East. And as I said, before, there's no trains at all between Manchester and London.
Do you think the public is still generally supportive of the rail strikes?
So it's an interesting question, whether or not the public are still supportive. I think the last big survey, the YouGov survey, was in January, and that found that the public were far more supportive of, strikers who are NHS workers. The nurses strike, people sort of were very much behind. But when it came to the rail strikes, I think about 40% of people said they supported rail strikers. It was sort of on a par with, things like university workers striking. There is far more support still for, NHS workers and those sort of people seen as, key medical workers. But there hasn't been a big survey done since that. The unions say that they've still got the support of people, and they've certainly still got the support of their members.
Let's go to the ads. Stay there to hear the background on the dispute and how long the strikes could potentially carry on for. Welcome back. Still with me is Rachael Burford, the Evening Standard's chief political correspondent. This dispute with rail unions has been going on for a long time now. What is the background on this and why can't they reach an agreement?
Yeah, so it's been almost a year now since we saw our first train strikes. So it is a long-running dispute. And sadly, it seems this morning it was confirmed that, they're basically no closer to a deal than they were a year ago. As Left General Secretary Mick Whelan said, he sort of hinted it could run on for years because they just haven't come to any agreement with the government or the rail delivery groups that they say that their members would accept. He said he's not had meetings with ministers since January 6th. So it's been quite a long time since they've actually been in proper discussions with the government. They are asking for a pay rise and certain conditions on their contracts. They want a significant pay rise. I think they've been offered 4%, which they say is extremely unfair when inflation is just above 10% still. And there doesn't seem to be any movement at all on it. In March, the RMT workers at Network Rail did accept their pay deal. So that sort of called off those strikes. But there is still no movement at all between the rail delivery group and RMT and ASLEF.
Train travel in general seems to be pretty unreliable for passengers now because of not only strikes but engineering works. Do you think there's a danger of people choosing to avoid trains now altogether?
Yeah, I think it's extremely frustrating, especially if you're a season ticket holder and you are relying on these trains to get to work on time every day and you're relying on a very regular service. I think we saw earlier this month the government take TransPennine Express into public ownership. I think that makes the government now the single biggest trains operator in the UK. And that's the first time that's happened in decades. I think it's taken 6 operators into public ownership because they were so unreliable. And people, particularly around big cities, do rely on these services. In London, particularly, you've got, it is much harder and more expensive to own a car with things like the ULEZ, the congestion charge zone. And people do opt to not own a car. And that is why we really do need a very reliable train service to get people to and from work, to get people to and from appointments and things. And there have been warnings from government ministers this week and MPs saying if the unions continue with this action, you're going to end up forcing people back into cars, forcing people to choose different routes to work because they just can't rely on the train service. On the flip side of that, obviously, the unions say, well, the train companies have been relying on us accepting lower wages, not accepting pay rises, and working overtime for far too long, and they deserve a better deal.
Are we just potentially looking at it being a sort of stalemate for years now, or is there anything the government can do at any point to intervene and prevent the ongoing disruption?
Well, as of today, we're pretty much in a stalemate. I think we're going to have an election probably next year, so I think the government will want to get this sorted before then. I think they'll be looking at the sort of figures of, how much people are supporting the train strikers. But at the end of the day, this is something that, whether or not the public support them, they do need to get on trains. So they are going to have to sort it out. And they're going to have to get around to the table and sort of thrash this out and get it done. I think the government will be more keen to do that as the sort of election approaches. We've had the Transport Secretary, Mark Harper, this morning saying, the offer that they have put on the table is fair and it's the only one they're going to get. It would bring the average train driver's salary to £65,000 a year, which is, a good salary to a lot of people. And they're accusing the unions of refusing to let their members vote on this. So there is a sort of big war of words going on at the moment, and not much action in terms of coming to any kind of agreement.
And if this does continue, what are the other potential knock-on effects for the country?
Yeah, so businesses obviously really want this dispute to come to an end, particularly hospitality businesses, which have suffered so much through the pandemic with all the closures during lockdowns. And now they're finding, customers just not coming in during the week because they can't, workers aren't coming in after work. They can't get to work. They can't get trains. They're seeing people not come in because they're not going to concerts and things because they can't get there. So I think hospitality businesses particularly are being hit really hard by these strikes. We've seen I think UK Hospitality say this strike alone this week is going to cost hospitality businesses around £130 million. And, you're going to see all those pubs around Wembley not having as many people there, and all the hotels that would have had people in them just sort of not getting the custom that they would have got, because people just can't get to these venues, or are going to have to go home early because it's going to take them much longer to get back. So I think the hospitality businesses particularly are really suffering during these industrial walkouts.
You can find out more about the train strikes on our website, standard.co.uk. And that's it from The Leader. This podcast is back tomorrow at 4 p.m.